Hello and welcome. You're watching Macros with Mythili, where we take a hard look at the major macroeconomic issues facing the country. By that yardstick, few issues could be more critical than addressing the decline in exports and incentivizing export performance. There is a reason why this is so critical. It's only through strong export performance that we can hope to rein in our current account deficit on a more sustainable basis, and without resorting to measures like compressing gold imports through administrative fiat. And to discuss how we can do this, the challenges and the opportunities in the export sector, I am joined by Rafeeque Ahmed, President of the Federation of Indian Exporters Organization, and Rajesh Chadha, Senior Fellow at NCAER and one of our leading trade economists. Welcome to the show, Rafeeque, and also you, Rajesh. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes,
if I can start with just asking you about how should we look at India's export performance? Should we look at it in this way that our share in world exports is less than 2%, merchandise trade is less than 2%, while China's is close to 12%? Are we way below our potential? And what are the reasons that are holding our export performance back?
Yeah, I think we are much below our potential as far as the exports are concerned, particularly the merchandise exports. And the reasons are something to do with our own manufacturing policy and manufacturing performance. Because we were riding on the success of services exports during the first half of 2000s, but that steam is now, the fizz is going out, and hence the surplus from services that used to offset the deficit on merchandise trade, we are losing on that. So it is very important for India to move fast as far as the exports in goods are concerned, merchandise exports are concerned, and particularly the labor intensive.
Why have they slowed down?
Look, exports have slowed down in the last 3 or 4 years. It has something to do with the, and please note that this has happened even while the currency has depreciated during the last 2 years. The slowdown is also something to do with the world slowdown in trade, but that should not keep us passive, because it's not just because of the world trade slowdown. It's much to do with our own domestic policies not being set right. And a lot of talk is between labor law and exit policy and investment incentives, and also the land acquisition, along with the single window scheme not being there. So a lot of hassle in creating new investment.
If I can turn now to Rafeeque. Rafeeque, as a president of FIO and as an exporter in your own right, would you agree that we're way below potential? And the reasons are multifaceted really. What would you kind of pin down as a major reasons why our export performance is not as good as China's?
See, if you see the China, the exports are happening there not only out of Chinese manufacturing. There are a lot of FDIs have come out in the last 10 years from Korea, Japan, Taiwan. They all shifted their manufacturing base to China, and from there they started to export. That is also a very big contribution has come for their percentage. In that sense, for exports, nothing much FDI has come to India. Today, 80% or 85% of manufacturing which is going for exports are done by the domestic industry only, not through FDI or foreign companies, excepting for the automobiles which has come out recently. Most of them have been to domestic. That is one reason. Second one is the infrastructure in India has not been very good. Our export infrastructure is still poor, and most of the infrastructures are also controlled by the states. And states are not showing much of interest on the exports. That is also one of those problems where they don't understand the potential of exports and the employment in their own states. They feel that the exports, they will not have the taxes, cannot collect taxes. That is the view they always have. All these together, we have not grown to the level of China. But at the same time, I feel the opportunity is very big for India now. India can become, our export share can go up very sharply in the coming years, because China's cost is going up, and many of the Americans and Europeans and the ASEAN country people are looking to relocate it to other countries. So India is one of the options. unless now at least we should have a investment policy which should attract more investment to come for manufacture and part of it to go away for export.
Rajesh, Rafeeque raised two very important points. One is about how China has got so much FDI into the export sector, linking it to the entire issue of global supply chains, value chains. And the second is about infrastructure and SEZs. Let's take them one by one. As far as the global value chains are concerned, have we missed out by not being part of the global supply chain? How significant is that a contributory factor to the general apathy in our export performance?
That's a very important point that needs to be addressed with a little more care, that when we say that China's exports are high, very high, when you go to the Chinese database or Chinese economists, they tell us that please note that a lot of it has to do with the import content that goes along with their exports. So one of the examples that I hear is that iPhone exported at $400 is their value added maybe less than $30. Okay. And so one needs to be careful about how we measure exports. And also note that since you have asked the question of global supply chains, what is happening is that it's not anymore the traditional trade that happens, that we prepare something or produce something and export it. What is happening is that the components travel multiple number of times. Okay. So the total international trade is being multiple counted, not double counted, but multiple counted. Also note that China has got huge FDI, but even today the China's trade surplus, that is merchandise trade surplus, is riding on the wave of low skill labor intensive exports, which have a huge surplus, and high skill or high tech exports have a huge deficit. So the surplus on labor intensive, low skill or medium skill labor intensive is so high that it more than offsets the deficit there. And the issue of global supply chains is important. If you would like me to move on to that.
Yeah, very briefly, because you were speaking about the hub and spokes model before we started the program. If you could just tell us very briefly about how it works.
So I'll give a short statement which I missed on China, that China has a very good database on what they call processing trade. Okay. So multinationals have set up factories in China. They provide the raw material and inputs, and this is called processing trade. All of that has to be exported, cannot be sold domestically. So this is called processing trade, which is much different from. And then the issue of global supply chains. As I said, the WTO has now moved on with WIOD, World Input Output Database, and also something called trade in value added, because actually the country earns from the value added from this trade. And there is a lot of discussion on global supply chains, which are actually not global, which are regional. For example, there are three components of this global supply chain. One is factory North America, the other one is factory Europe, and the third one is factory Asia. But so it is a lot of regionalism or regionalization of trade. US is the hub, Canada and Mexico are the spokes. Germany is the hub for Europe, and other countries are spokes. Similarly, Japan is the hub in Asia, other countries are spokes. The difference in one line is that when hubs are exporting something to the rest of the world, but particularly in its own region, it has very little import content compared to when the spokes export their things. So they have a lot of import content from the hub concerned. Similarly, Germany would have much less import content from the other European countries, but other European countries would have much higher, and likewise with Japan. I am looking at or thinking of India becoming a hub for some of the South countries.
Well, I'm afraid on that note, we'll have to slip into a very short break, but we'll be back very soon to discuss the SEZs with Rafeeque. So please stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Macros with Mythili, and we're discussing India's export performance and what can be done to improve India's share in global exports. Rafeeque, we just heard Rajesh talking about global supply chains and how India could be part of this hub and spokes model. Would you agree, does India have greater potential to be a hub, or would you think we have to settle for being a spoke for a while?
I have a feeling that it has to be an exports for a while, but the possibility of a hub also is there. But unless the whole infrastructure, the regulations are made easier, that may not be possible. In China, for instance, when the other FDI came for that labor, the labor policy was so flexible that if they don't like some of the labor or somebody, they can call the labor department, they can replace with somebody else. They will take them back and they'll put them somewhere. That was so easy. In India, the labor policy is not there. So the hub it will take time unless we change our rules and regulations, then we will become. Otherwise, our exports will flourish in the coming years because our manufacturing capability has to improve and our capacity has to improve.
You also spoke, Rafeeque, about infrastructure being a big stumbling block, but the whole idea of special economic zones was to in fact give world-class infrastructure. So why have SEZs failed in India while they've succeeded so dramatically in China?
See, the SEZ, first of all, the policy, once you establish a policy and tell the whole world, we have established a free trade zone SEZ here, and these are the policy, these are the tax policy, these are the other regulatory policies, and you have to stick to that. They cannot change in between. The government and the revenue finance department came and put taxes on them. The MAT, they introduced the MAT, and that has really put out the charm on the hub, on the SEZ. And many of the people felt that this was not planned. They were only planning a zero tax rates on that. That has been introduced. Secondly, the outside SEZ, lot of incentives were given in case of focused market scheme, drawback are given, and then it is the market MDA is given for them. All those facilities were started giving after the MAT, and giving incentives to DTA area made it less interesting for the SEZ and also less competitive for them to be there in the SEZ. So eventually it is not taken off as we wanted it to take off. Many of the people also wanted to shift to the DTA. They felt that DTA is better than there because they will get at least 8 to 10% more incentive from the government than sitting in the SEZ and paying also taxes on that, bad taxes there. That has the big difference then. China's policy is very consistent and they declare the time. These are the time which you will have tax free. After so many years you will have this much of tax. All things are very clear, so the people come and invest. That is why our SEZ policy has not taken up, and many people, not serious people, also jumped into that SEZ developers, thinking like a real estate. That has a hit on the SEZ progress in the SEZ zones.
Would you agree with that, Rajesh, that this policy flip-flopped, as with many other sectors, including telecom, that has really made SEZs a non-starter?
What has happened with the SEZs, special economic zones, there was an act passed in 2005, and we were quite happy with what is going to happen, and with the manufacturing policy announcing new investment and manufacturing zones. But what we have seen is that what the SEZs have not been able to use in economics, what we call the comparative advantage. Please note that we thought that it would have employment, we would have the wage rate advantage, and semi-skilled or small and medium enterprises would also enter there. Firstly, please note that out of about 590 SEZs registered, only less than 140 are operating. Many of the applications are being withdrawn, and it is difficult to believe that less than 10% of the exports is actually the labor-intensive exports. More than 60% or 67% exports is the IT-enabled services. So if SEZs are again about, they are the mirror reflection of what is happening in.
So were we not able to provide them the world-class infrastructure that we promised?
Infrastructure development has not been as fast as we thought would be, and my understanding is that 2 years ago, the exports were about $65 billion, close to 25% of India's exports. Only $1 billion were leather, wearing apparel, and ready-made garments, which implies that there is no level playing field for all the sectors, and the investment issues that we thought the people would come, as Rafeeque has mentioned. People have not jumped in because the issues of, I'm not very sure about the land acquisition there, because the government would have provided some land, but the overall performance has been much less than what the potential was.
So you have, if you had to pinpoint two significant differences between our SEZs and China's, what would they be? Because to explain the huge difference in performance of the two countries.
One, I would, even though there is likely to be a flexible labor law there, but we are told that labor law issues are still pending.
That's a political hot potato.
Yes, in SEZs. And the second one is the ease of entering and doing business. I am told that Chinese are quite flexible about the foreign direct investments coming in. We too are, but there is a clear difference between how the investments have come in to us and to China. So there must be something to do with some policy reform which is missing. Even though we are calling it SEZs, we are nowhere close to what China has been able to succeed on.
Rafeeque, if I can turn to the Exim policy, I think perhaps exports are the only sector where we really have a specific policy. And now we're at the end of this 2009-14 policy. What is it that was missing in the Exim policy, and what would you like the new government to announce in their Exim policy which will help an exporter like you?
See, what I am saying that, see, the exports are not decided in 1 year or 2 years. The policy should have 5 years policy and consistent with that. See, they announce a 5-year policy, and every year the minister will announce amendment to the policy or something more they will introduce. But there is not at all a 5-year policy. The policy stands as a paper as 5-year. But every year there will be hundreds of amendments coming in between, and that spirit is not there as a 5-year. Secondly, we fix in India the export target for 1 year. Next year, what should be the export? And that too takes 6 months for them to fix the target. It is not like that. Exports does not happen like that. It has to be planned well ahead in at least 3 years before. So we are telling at FIO is that the new government is please fix an export target for the 5 years from 2015 to 2020. 2020, what should be the export amount? This is the number we should have as an export. Then work backwards, whether we have capacity, whether we have infrastructure, whether what we need to do it, then we can able to do it and reach that number. That is the new policy we are telling the government, and there are a lot of FTAs are opening for India's exports. In the next 5 years, there will be more than 20,000 items are coming under zero for India's benefit for exporters. That has to be highlighted. Those market has to be focused. And telling you on the MDA policy, market development allowance policy, we have an export of 18 lakhs crores, and the amount given as a subsidy for marketing is 150 crores. It's a pittance. It's a small amount. This marketing fund is allowed under WTO. This is not questioned under WTO. We must have at least 0.5% of our exports amount to be given as a market development fund, and we should really be aggressive, make the exporters aggressive and in the market internationally, and they have to participate in every fair, every market, every study tours, and that way we can really achieve our target for the next 5 years.
Okay.
And we are estimating that our export target should be around 750 billion in the next 5 years.
Very quickly before we slip into another break, Rajesh, would you agree with that target of 700 billion, or you think it's too optimistic?
You see, I am a bit uncomfortable with setting the targets.
Okay.
We have been setting the targets of our plan throughout our planning era.
Okay.
I would rather say that let us gear up the comparative advantage, and rest would
So you would
follow.
not like to fix a definite numerical target,
Yes,
but I'm afraid on that note we'll have to slip into another break, but we'll be back very soon. So please do stay with us. You're watching Macros with Mythili. Welcome back. You're watching Macros with Mythili, and we're discussing India's export performance and what can be done to improve that performance. Rajesh, if I can turn to you once again, because you're an expert on the World Trade Organization and India's negotiations. Now we're seeing the WTO is not going anywhere. The Doha round, virtually everybody's forgotten about it. How critical is, the successful completion of the Doha round for India's export efforts?
Look, to begin with, I believe in multilateralism. I believe in Doha round being successful, because that is a win-win situation. Note that there are LDCs, less developed countries and low-income countries, who may not be able to take a lot of advantage when we move from multilateralism to plurilateral or mega blocks. So, my preference would be, but that is not writing on the wall, that there should be a multilateral discipline. However, a very nice piece of paper by Richard Baldwin tells us that this WTO may not be able to handle the issues which are WTO plus, may that be investment, labor, or various other issues. Hence, what they have done, and the issues of global supply chains, because global supply chains have certain disciplines, rules of origin, which cannot be easily addressed by a single organization.
Sure.
Hence, there is India is hardly a part of any significant bilateral trade agreement, and with China we were going to have one, but we have still not had one. It doesn't worry me, because China is still one of the top trading partners, even without an FTA. But one thing that we should be very careful is that there are two mega blocks that US is creating. One is called Transatlantic Trade and Investment Bloc, and the other is Trans-Pacific. Transatlantic is between the US and the EU, where they are keeping others out, but the second one is a little more pervasive. It includes countries in Asia, and they are calling it Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Given that it is already there, we also have entered or been a partner with the Regional Economic Partnership and Cooperation, RECP, some people call it RCEP, that is ASEAN plus 6 countries, where we have Korea, Japan, India, Australia, New Zealand playing their role. However, this is yet to kick off, like other mega blocks are to kick off, and India needs to take the best advantage of a Pan-Asia free trade agreement. Last thing before I stop for these issues, there are going to be serious frictions even between these trading blocks, because in transatlantic bloc, that is, sorry, Trans-Pacific, TTI, the US is there, but China is not there. But in RCEP, China is, so there are going to be frictions between the blocks and rules of origin. However, a little more worry about the least developed countries, how would they be, even though the WTO has said DFQF, duty-free, quota-free schemes, which we have already provided to many least developed countries. So, in nutshell, Richard Baldwin talks about WTO 2, but we have to be very careful about India's interests and move forward. Absolutely. As far as
if I could just turn to you, Rafeeque, at this point of time, because you're in the business, say, of leather exports. Now, with how much concern do you view the fact that maybe WTO is not going to happen, and maybe we'll increasingly push into regional trade blocks where we don't have much of a voice? How concerned are you about things like non-tariff barriers?
See, what I'm thinking is now the WTO things are not moving, and this trade, the only future is for us is to have a trade blocks. We have to have a FTAs and comprehensive trade agreements with many countries, even including China. We should enter with China and see that our exports are going to that country and we can able to increase. And I feel that even as a leather exporter, and which is growing at a very fast, this year we have grown almost 20%. Growth was there, and we see this happening in the next coming couple of years also, that we feel that the bilateral agreement itself can lead us to a much better position than waiting for something to happen under the WTO or any other agreement, Doha round agreements and other agreements. But one thing which I should appreciate is the agreement in Bali, which will enable Indian government to set its policy things clear. Because today the Bali bill include that no policy change should be announced abruptly for imports or exports. They should have given time and say the tariff rates also has to be announced earlier. That will going to benefit our Indian exporters as far as the Indian importers will also. So that global trade for India will be benefited out of the Bali agreement than any other agreement. That's my view.
Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this edition of Macros with Mythili. Thank you, Rafeeque, for joining us. Thank you, Rajesh, also for joining us and giving us your very valuable suggestions on how to improve India's export performance, which I hope the new government will take very seriously. Thank you also for watching, but we'll be back next week, same time, with Macros with Mythili. Till then, it's thank you and goodbye from all of us at ET Now.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.